Okay, hi everyone, welcome back. 2023 first video. This one we're going to talk about conditioning for a black belt grading. At my black belt grading last month, a number of comments were made that I'm impressed with my conditioning, my ability to maintain a level of output and level of intensity throughout a 3.5 hour black belt grading. My karate, that was a bit but my conditioning was quite good. So a few people have asked what I did, and a couple of people who have grading coming up have asked if they could get an idea. So I'm going to provide videos of the training and conditioning that I did to prepare for the black belt grading. In particular, it's based on 3 principles. Those principles are specificity, fitness, progressive overload, and periodization. And how we go about doing that. And that's a sports science approach that's used across most elite sport levels to some degree. The way they apply it may be different, but this is still the predominant process that is used. But before we get into that, I'm using the term conditioning, not fitness. Fitness is the generic term, whereas conditioning, we're dealing with our fuel systems and preparing or making our fuel systems more efficient in their operation. So what we mean by our fuel systems is adenosine triphosphate, which is the fuel that the body uses, and the systems are the process in which it manufactures its ATP for use. So I'm going to go on that because there's a lack of understanding of what they are and what they actually mean. So if you have an understanding of the types of fuel systems and when they are actually used, you'll have a better understanding of the reason I process or conduct my training the way I did. So if we talk about our fuel systems, we have 2 types of fuel systems. You probably would have heard of these terms. You hear of aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic is producing our ATP in the presence of oxygen, whereas anaerobic is producing ATP without the presence of oxygen. So that's when it's using foodstuffs, glucose, glycogen, those sort of fat, well, not so much fats, but those sort of components. So we need to understand those 2 types of fuel systems, but more importantly, what fuel systems are used when. So the first thing we need to realize, although there's 2 types, there are 3 actual fuel systems. So we have 1 aerobic energy system and we have 2 anaerobic energy systems. So we'll start with the anaerobic systems. The first one we're going to come up to is the ATP-PC energy system, adenosine triphosphate phosphate creatine energy system. It's also referred to as the alactic energy system or the phosphate energy system, and it'll vary. So basically, that energy system is what we use for an all-out burst of energy. And we're talking about 100% effort. So in athletics, we're looking at the 100-meter sprint. And the reason why we can sprint 100 meters at top speed, but not much longer, is because this energy system will only last 7 to 10 seconds. And it is an all-out effort. So sprinting, long jump, boxing. Kumite, when you're sparring in kumite and you explode into an attack, delivering a technique very short, that's predominantly ATP-PC. So it is working at 100% intensity. Now the next anaerobic energy system is glycolysis, or the breakdown of glycogen and glucose. Glycogen is what the body stores glucose in the muscles. So it breaks down glycogen and glucose to form the ATP. The intensity that is used in glycolysis or the lactate energy system is still incredibly high, but it is not at 100%. So if you were to look at it in athletics terms, ATP-PC, that is the 100-meter sprint. Next we go to the 400-meter sprint. Intensity is still extremely high. It is at lasts about 45 seconds. So to compare the difference in the intensities, the 100-meter sprint is run in just under 10 seconds. The world record's 9:58. Most people in the Olympic final will run it around the 9:8s, 9:9s. The 400 metre, you're looking at a world record of 43 point some seconds. So if we look at the comparison, they're running 100 meters in just under 10 seconds, whereas for the 400 meter at the Olympics, they're running each 100 meter section at just under 11 seconds. Still incredibly high. You know, we're well in our 90%, but it is not at 100%. So, and the anaerobic or the lactate energy system lasts for about 45 seconds. Well, between 40 to 50, and we need to go efficient. High metabolic waste products, hence why at the end of it you are breathing so heavy, your respiration is accelerated for some time, your heart rate is pumping really hard. As it tries to clear out your carbon dioxide, your hydrogen ions, circulate the lactate, get that to the liver to break down to produce more ATP. All these components are going on to clear so we can return back to it. The other thing, it only lasts 40 to 50 seconds because to produce ATP through the anaerobic measures, it doesn't produce enough to maintain that intensity. So you start running out of ATP and your metabolic waste products are not being cleared. So our next energy system, we refer to the aerobic energy system, and this is pretty much everything else. And this is the production of ATP with oxygen in present, and it utilizes fat. So the intensity is low, but it can actually still be relatively high and still being aerobic. In fact, the aerobic energy system is the predominant energy system up to and including 85% max heart rate. That's known as the anaerobic threshold. That's where you can maintain a certain steady state and your body can produce ATP that it requires and clear the waste products without it building up. Once it breaches that 85%, we start producing too much waste products that the body can't clear out it fast enough, and we start not being able to produce ATP fast enough to match the intensity. Now, if we were to look at the marathon run, they're running the marathon at between 20 and 21 kilometers an hour for just over 2 hours. So the intensity can be still extremely high. So we need to train all these energy systems at various times. So just merely assuming that, oh, we're training hard because we're hot and sweaty and we're breathing, doesn't necessarily mean we're training anaerobic. Most of our classes that we assist in are only producing aerobic energy training. We might occasionally breach into anaerobic threshold, but then we generally drop back. And in our line drills, we might go, you'd think anaerobic is hard and fast, but we might do a line drill, then we come back, and we might be at medium, then we go hard and fast, then we come back, and then we do another combination, and we do that at medium. So we're not really having any sustained effort in the anaerobic zone. So when we're preparing for a grading, we need to understand that in a grading, like most sporting competitions, when you're actually performing, you are all performing anaerobically. So we really need to develop that anaerobic conditioning to ensure that we have the conditioning and the capacity to function for that 3.5 hours of a black belt grading. That doesn't mean we just train anaerobic. We do still have to deal with our aerobic energy system and train that. And I'll go through how we do that in the next video when we start talking about specificity fitness, progressive overload, and a periodized training program. So remember that 3 energy systems, they work together, but we'll have a dominant energy system based on intensity. Up to and including 85% is aerobic. From 85 to just under 100%, we're starting to refer to the lactate energy system, and at 100% all-out effort is our phosphate energy system. All right, guys, so remember that. Have a look at the next video, which will detail to you our approach to dealing with laying out a training plan for a black belt grading. All right, guys, see you soon.